So I'm not your average Microsoft employee. I mean, I use my iPad and such. And I haven't gotten fired for it yet. I kind of have a sort of a different thing to talk about. I mean, basically, I've been extremely successful. I've done 2 startups, and they both landed with success. By the way, Ben is really a heck of actually a hell of a guy to follow of an act. Well, Jesus, I'm not going to be as good as him. But anyways, I've had a couple of successful startups, and I've certainly worked with some good software companies and done some fun things like Photoshop and other things like that. So anyways, where's my slide? Where's the clicker? I need the clicker. Here we go. Okay, so what I thought I would do, this is not the, there we go. So what I thought I would do is just give you some vignettes from my past successes, things that I've done that have been successful, things that I've done that have been horrible, and hopefully out of these stories will come some advice that might help you, and maybe not. So anyways, let's get on with this. So the first company I did was a very, very long time ago. I was actually not a founder per se, I was the first employee. We worked out of our basements, did everything you would do as a founder of a company, and built this crazy thing called Authorware. Now Authorware, for those of you who may or may not know the history of a company called Macromedia, I assume many of you have heard of Macromedia? Use some of their products and things. How many have ever heard of Authorware? Not too many. Anyways, so Authorware was the merger of a company called Authorware and a company called Macromind. Authorware came out of Minneapolis, Macromind came out of Chicago. We both moved to the Bay Area, and that's kind of how things got going. So Authorware was my first very serious foray into software, and this isn't working so well. There we go. Now, I thought I would intersperse some vignettes. This is actually me. I call this my toddler phase in the software business. And for those of you who care about cars, that actually is a '63 Ford Falcon. This was taken a very long time ago, and I'm probably older than most of you, so just to let you know. Anyways, startup stories. So, calculated risk pays off. I don't know, there's not much else to say. You're just not going to be successfl if you're not willing to take risk. Risk, comes in lots of different ways. I'll give you a story here. So early on, I was selling computers, and the Mac came out, and I just fell in love with the Mac, and it was the original Mac. This is the thing that was underpowered and didn't work so well, but I was completely captivated with it, so much so that I couldn't sell IBM PCs, I couldn't sell anything else. So anyways, I ended up doing some consulting for the Mac, and I ended up doing some sort of crazy things, and ended up getting invited to interview at a company called Ashton Tate, and they were building a product called DBase Mac back in the day, and this is early in the day. I ended up getting into an argument with the people who were interviewing me about the merits of Pascal when they were actually writing things in C. Now, I don't know how many developers are here, but that's kind of a silly thing to be arguing about. But I was really passionate about writing software in Pascal, and they were really passionate about writing things in C. They should have hired me, I guess, but I'm guessing in some ways I'm glad that they didn't. So anyways, when I ran into this little ad in the paper about the startup that they called themselves Authorware, I bought my demos and my little tiny mini resume to them, and they said, and I showed them this little bouncing thing that bounced off the screen, whatever else. It was kind of interesting. They said, "Oh my God, this is kind of cool. I guess this works pretty cool. What did you write this in?" I said, C. I didn't. I wrote it in Pascal. I hadn't actually written one line of C code, and actually I didn't even know much about C, but I wrote. But basically, I said, you shouldn't probably lie, but I did anyways. And what it did though is it got me the job, and I went to the bookstore and bought a book about C, and since we were working on our basements, I was able to sort of hide the fact that I didn't know C. But this was a risk. It was a calculated risk. And if I hadn't lied, I probably wouldn't have gotten the job, and I probably wouldn't, I don't know, be working for Microsoft today or something. I don't know. But that's it's just something that sometimes I think you have to do if you want to get somewhere. You can't expect somebody to give you an opportunity if you're just sitting there and you're not being willing to take a risk. So, anyways, there's another story about authorware, and it's a different one. So, there was a point in time when authorware was growing quite a lot. By the way, we were an interactive multimedia authoring system, if you know what that is, back in the day. There was a time when we actually did a deal with IBM. IBM was going to have us do one of their core pieces of software for a new line of Mac-like computers, which they had never launched, by the way. They certainly loved Apple, and they wanted to build an Apple Mac-like product. And so we did a deal with IBM, and I was given the opportunity to run that team. That team was something that I needed to hire. I needed to hire 5 to 10 software engineers, some developers, some test folks. And I'm in Minnesota, and I'm like, I can't hire these people here. This is the Midwest. I have to be in one coast or the other. It's the only way this is going to work. And I ended up moving to the Bay Area. Actually, the whole company ended up moving to the Bay Area eventually. And it was really ironic. So here we are, a tiny little startup called Authorware. What a crazy name for a software company anyways at the time. And we can't hire people. In fact, we certainly can't hire people that we wanted to hire from the big companies in this kind of business. And we ended up hiring a couple of folks that were sort of based in California, grew up in California. And we hired a bunch of folks from the Midwest. And the irony is we ended up firing the Californians, and we ended up really loving the folks from the Midwest. So I figured that out. So anyways, so when people say you can't build a team here, and Ben and others, you can, even back in the 80s when we were doing this work. So I was eventually, I should say, I'm sorry. So eventually you might know that Macromedia went IPO, and so that was basically. I held a lot of authorware stock, and we converted to Macromedia, and they went IPO, and it was a big deal, and it was a success for sure. 5 years, lots of sweat, lots of labor, lots of passion. By the way, that was what Paige talked about, how important passion is. Anyways, and there was a success, so there you go. So I was recruited by a guy named Eric Zucker. You don't know the name. The other thing about this, excuse me, is Eric Zucker is a guy that I've done now 4 things with, and actually today he's with me at Microsoft and we're working together. And part of this is the importance of a network. Adobe was an interesting company for me. By the way, I call this my ugly, or I should say awkward teenage years in the business. So sometimes it works. Okay, so risk. So the thing about it that was interesting about here is getting the job at Adobe. Now, I really, by the time we had done the authorware thing and we were selling it for $4,000 to corporations, I really wanted to do something that was more mainstream. And I was given the opportunity to run what was at that time a little tiny arm of Adobe who was big into PostGift and all crazy things. I was really interested in running a couple of teams, the Photoshop team and the Illustrator team at Adobe, and it's a pretty big deal, and I was pretty passionate about the whole idea. And yet, I just interviewed over and over and over again, and it just wasn't happening. And finally, I said, here, Eric, this is, if I'm not everything, if I don't blow you away within 6 months, fire me, But if I do blow you away in 6 months, then I want you to give me a raise. And this again is a situation where you just gotta sort of stick it out there. And I did get hired, and I did blow them away, and I did get that raise. And it's just something that I think if you're going to be successful, you just have to be willing to stick it all out there. Passion. Paige talked about it. If what you're doing and what you do so often in life, and in software companies, you don't work normal 40-hour weeks. That just isn't the way it works. If you don't love every aspect of what you're doing, you're just not going to be very good at it. And it's something that I just think it's just as Paige talked about, it's crucial to being successful in this business. So I was running, at a time I didn't really know how to control my own passion, and frankly I didn't really know how to control my own motivation. One thing that was going on when we were doing Photoshop 3. Photoshop 3, by the way, I don't know if you know much about it, but it was kind of the very first thing that put it on the map. It did layers, and I don't know if you guys are graphic artists, but it was a really big release. And it really launched Adobe into what became what they really are today, which is really about creative suites and creative applications. And Adobe Illustrator was very similar, and I was running both teams. And I worked literally 20-hour days, 6 to 7 days a week, because I was just, we were running late, and I had committed to getting this stuff done, and the team felt I needed to sort of work my hours, and sometimes passion can go awry. We actually did end up shipping things and shipping it and building great product and high quality stuff, and it was a really big milestone. But I actually heard the other day, one of my former employees at the time, one of the top guys I worked with, a guy named Mark Hamburg. Mark, you're not listening. But what I had heard a story was, he had said that, I heard a rumor from a friend of a friend who said, Ann, Mark's wife, hates you. She just hates you. I'm like, why would she hate me? She says, because you made her husband work every day, every night, all those hours. And I said, well, I never made anybody do anything, but they followed me. Anyways, you can end up burning out your teams, and it's just not necessarily the right thing to do, but it is required to be successful. So I don't know how to do that, but anyways. What happened about halfway through my time at Adobe is, speaking of burning teams out and actually sort of a job to work life and home life balance, my wife said, I can't live in California. I can't raise our kids here. I'm moving back to Minnesota. I hope you follow me, but I'm doing this. And that started a period of commuting back and forth back to Minnesota, where we grew up, where we had our home, and it started this commuting thing, and it was really a problem at first. It's like, how do I do what I do here in Minnesota again? I'm kind of stuck here. How do I do this? And it was interesting. You do something that's interesting enough. You do something that you have enough passion about, and you can tell a great story about, and people will come. People will work with you. People will be hired. We actually, what we ended up doing was, out of, this time, my basement in Minnesota, created an office for Adobe, which exists today, no longer in my basement, but actually in a nearby town. It's 70 people that are working on all of Adobe's primary things. That still exists today. And I completely was wrong about the ability to hire great people. Certainly in Minnesota, I'm sure the same story here is in Omaha or Des Moines. There are great people, and if you do something that's exciting enough, they'll follow you around. So anyways, it's really important. So I left Adobe, why? Because, well, it was 1998, and you might remember those years or not. It was the dot-com bubble, right? You could just make up some numbers and start a company, and that was what you did. And I felt I had to do that. I had to have that experience, and so I did. I created something, and it was a really incredible idea that we did. By the way, this is a lot of the team. I was really naive about business, and so I'm thinking, I'm working for Adobe. I'd like to start something up. I know that it was started by these two really cool guys named John Warnock and Chuck Geschke. I know that they left Xerox to do this thing called PostGift, and they took a lot of technology and a lot of people from that to start it up. And I'm thinking, if I were to talk directly to the CEO. By the way, I was working for the president at the time not the CEO, not John Warnock. I was working for a guy named Bruce Chizen, and when we were looking at forming the startup, a lawyer, our lawyer, basically said, "Are you really going to just walk in there and you're going to say you'd like to take 5 people with you and start up this company, and you think they're going to like that?" And I said, "Oh, of course. It's like we're like family. I mean, look, we've worked together for years. How could they not love that?" And in fact, I did resign to a guy named John Warnock, the chairman of the company. And he's like, "Wow, oh, and you're going to work with this Eric Zucker guy again," which, by the way, he had left the company and been successful. And now we're doing this startup together. And he's like, "Oh, this is great. I mean, I'm not great. I'm not happy to lose you or anything else. But hey, if you're at least we're going to invest in you. Would you like that?" And I said, "Sure, that'd be lovely." And what ended up happening is, of course, I didn't resign to the guy I'm working for. I resigned to his boss. And by the time my boss actually heard about this, he got the lawyers all lathered up and ended up by the end of the week with an 11-count federal lawsuit. And I was like, "Holy cow! What do we do now?" And by the way, the other people who hadn't resigned yet, but I had mentioned their names, were all fired for even considering working with this. And I guess that it was crazy, and everything they said in the lawsuit was completely false and wrong. But what do you do in that situation? So we ended up immediately getting into settlement talks, and we ended up settling, and they ended up basically taking the really amazing idea that we had and then taking some ownership in the company anyways. Afterwards, the Bruce Chizen, the guy that I worked for, I still like him. He said, "Doug, hey, next time you come to San Jose, let's grab a beer." And so I did, and he said, Doug, it's just business." And I didn't get that. It just seemed like such the wrong thing to do. Anyways, but this is just about, business is business, and it's not like family, and it's not like friends, and it's just a different story. So, anyways, I talk about passion here again. And it's an important thing, and I'm a little bit ashamed of it, because we ended up without the idea, and here we had 5 people. We have this startup. We're all out of a job. We're all doing this, and what do you do? And so we sat down, a bunch of us, and we went and we said, let's think of a bunch of ideas. And we thought of 8 ideas, and we ended up picking just one of them. The other 7 ideas all ended up being successful. They've all been done, all really been successful. And actually, even the one that we did also was a success. What we decided to do was something called internet reservations. OpenTable, those of you, do you guys ever use OpenTable here? So anyways, so this is what we decided to do. This was before OpenTable existed. And we though were an incredible software team from Adobe, and doing like the rest of reservations is kind of boring, but it's just one of those things, and it's just, you got to have the passion for it. We ended up, it was interesting. We did end up a year later deciding this wasn't that interesting. We had some success. We had trials in the market and all that business. But people were interested in buying us, and so we said, well, let's just sell. And the thing about that was interesting is that OpenTable was one of the people that wanted to buy us. We hadn't heard of them before. Another company was interested in us, and Macromedia, of all things, were interested in us. Now, this is Macromedia, back into Macromedia again. And they were interested in us because, not of what the work we did at Time Forward, which was cool and interesting, but because they knew that we were a software company that could make things happen and make things happen quickly. And so here we are. We ended up taking a crazy, stupid offer for more money than I could have imagined with Macromedia, which I guess leads me to the next thing. I do want to mention one other thing, though. Sorry. Taking care of your employees. I use the word networking here, too. It's really, 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 really important. There's so many startups that happen where people, they don't share the wealth, they do whatever else. I mean, look, I hired a bunch of people. They all took some form of ownership. We didn't have a chance to actually capitalize the company fully. We didn't actually have any legal binding to share basically the acquisition within the employees. I did it anyways because it was the right thing to do. And I gave everybody their share that I had promised them of the company. And everybody walked away happy. I walked away not nearly with as much money as I would have loved to have had. But these people, most of them, all of them actually, I think I've worked with again and again and again and again and again. And they're still, actually many of them are still with me today at our office for Microsoft. Okay, anyways, Macromedia acquired us. Okay, so this begins a danger of being successful, and it's something that I just got to talk about, and it is I call it hubris. So I've already talked about sort of how we take care of employees, the people who follow us, and they actually really enjoyed working again for us. Again, these are both Adobe employees, and all. It was kind of interesting, but the hubris thing, it was pretty cool, and that was actually Times Square. This picture, you might remember, this is year 2000, and that's me, and I'm up there on this crazy thing. It's nutty, but anyways, I had a pretty, I'm king of the world. You might remember the Titanic movie, James Cameron, he wins the thing and he says, I'm king of the world, So we actually had this soccer team that we formed out of Macromedia, and I loved playing soccer, and I had kids that were in soccer. And so we all got T-shirts. We all played soccer together because I did it, I guess. And we played a soccer game with the other company that I worked with, Adobe, and we all got names. We had custom soccer jerseys made, and it got names on the back. And I put on the back of mine, "King of the World." And I was just like, I just realized, I was kind of joking, but I really wasn't. And you can get caught up in your success in a way that just isn't healthy. And so it was interesting because you might remember here, so now we're in the go-go 90s, we actually designed a product that most of you have never heard of called Macromedia Site Spring. It was designed in the 90s for the kind of software, sort of internet startups. And it was a great tool for doing all the sorts of things you would do. But we designed it when the bubble was about to burst. We shipped it just as the bubble was bursting, and it just didn't go anywhere. Not only did it not go anywhere, but Macromedia, I think their stock at one point in time was at like 120, and by the time things got really bad, the stock was down to like 6, and a lot of us had lots of shares in Macromedia. So anyways, it was a difficult time, and we ended up getting our whole office getting shut down. Again, here is a Twin Cities office, getting shut down because of the way the market went, and it was difficult. And so, anyways, it's a story that's worth knowing. Anyways, so a couple years later, I'm at Microsoft now. Again, I talk about Microsoft as a place that I don't think of myself as the natural, normal Microsoft person. In fact, I really care about, I love small businesses, I love startups, I love being in some ways a startup inside a company. In fact, at Adobe, we were kind of a startup inside Adobe, the Minnesota office was. Microsoft were this idea, and I was actually recruited to bring a lot of my knowledge of the creative professional marketplace, into Microsoft. And they had a great team, a lot of really, really talented people, but they just weren't really great at planning products and getting products shipping. And so that was my job. And I actually had a lot of other opportunities. I ended up choosing Microsoft, and it just was so much different than I thought. I mean, again, I was the classic, Apple lover, Microsoft hater. I didn't think that Microsoft would be the thing for me, and it has been one of the most amazing places I've ever worked, and I'm not embarrassed to say that. It's kind of crazy, actually. Anyways, it's been interesting. So this was actually a product that, I don't know, has anybody ever heard of Expression or Expression Blend at all? Some of you use it. That's good. That's good. So it's actually pretty amazing what's going on right now. And you might not know all of what's going on right now. I'm not going to tell you all what's going on right now, but it's actually really fascinating what's going on. Anyways, a couple things to talk about here. So I want to build this sort of startup-like thing inside Microsoft, the first thing we have is this executive review of what are you going to do, Doug? You know, and I go in there and I basically say, look, the only way we're going to be successful competing in this case, we were trying to compete against Adobe. Every designer uses Adobe products. You know, how can we be successful? And I said the only way it's going to happen is if we execute, you know, quickly, and execute and over and over and over again. So in the 5 years I've been there, we've shipped 4 versions of Expression Blend, which is pretty darn good. I described a sort of a 5-year plan. I said, the first couple releases are going to be what I call engage releases: engage, compete, and win. And we're right now, I think we're about to the place where we want to be, which is pretty interesting. But again, here's this thing: risk. You know, I put myself and my team, on the line and said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do annual releases. Nobody ships software on an annual basis. That's certainly not at the time at Microsoft. And yet we knew we had to do that to be successful. And I committed the team. And one of the things that I talk about, this first 100 days thing, it's something that I think I actually read from Steve Jobs. He talked about how you have to be successful. You have to sort of establish yourself in the first 100 days. And it's true. I remember meeting with the team that I had, so I just joined the team. By the way, I'm in Minnesota working for Redmond. I made the commitment, by the way, to commute every week to Redmond back and forth because I needed to do that to establish things. But anyways, so I'm having a meeting with the team, first sort of introduction to the team. I guess you guys, and what I tell the team is, we have a privilege to ship a version 1.0 piece of software. And this is something that it's going to take everybody's commitment, everybody's passion, everybody's, you're going to be working at midnight and you're going to wonder why you're doing it. And you just have to have passion. And if you don't have passion for this, if this isn't the thing that you think you really want to do, if you're not willing to work that kind of hard, that's okay. I'm going to ask you to leave. We'll find a place for you inside Microsoft. And a couple of people did. But the rest of the team committed completely and wholly to doing this effort, and almost all of them are still with me today 5+ years later, which is pretty amazing. And again, the theme goes on and on. It's about passion, it's about commitment, and it's really, really, really important stuff. What have I learned? By the way, how are we doing time-wise? I guess we're doing okay. So calculated risk often pays off. It doesn't always pay off, but it often does. Again, if you're sitting waiting for somebody to do something for you, it just isn't going to happen. You have to ask for it, and I can give you lots of other stories around that. Treating your employees well, or your network well, is important. The ability to come in. We did eventually, by the way, I didn't mention this. We do have an office right now in St. Paul, Minnesota. So a third of the Expression team actually works out of St. Paul, and I now don't commute every week. I commute every other week. So I think that's a good thing. Anyways, treat your employees well. We managed to basically start up the Minnesota office with a bunch of people that I'd worked with in the past that knew what I was doing. They came and joined without knowing what piece of software they were working on, without knowing what they were going to do. They just trusted that I knew what I was doing and that they would do something fun. And they ended up doing amazing things. We literally went from 1 employee myself to 16 employees in like a month. And that's because we had a network. I had a network. They had networks. Treat them well, and it pays you back. Something that I think is worth remembering. I don't I'm not known at Microsoft by being the guy that did Photoshop, or even though it was one of the most fun things I ever did. I'm not known as the guy that started Macromedia or was a part of the starting of Macromedia. In fact, it just doesn't matter. It's what you do today and tomorrow that matters. And yeah, you can leverage all that experience, but it's something that's really important. So anyways, you can build a world-class engineering team. Certainly in Minneapolis. I haven't tried here. I'm sure you can here as well. There is awesome talent, and you just got to know where to look for it. I've said this before, have passion for what you do. It's really important as well. And I just think there's just no room for you know, I don't know, going crazy when you're successful. It just seems like the wrong thing to do. So anyways, that's what I have to say. And one last thing. That's how you can reach me if you're interested. So, thank you very much.
If it's all right with you, we've got a few minutes for a few questions. Q&A?
Yeah. So you can take questions if you have questions.
We do have a few minutes if folks have questions. We've got about 5 minutes if folks have questions for Douglas.
Questions. Oh, there's one.
All right, so you've worked more or less in this same space for, you know, an incredible career.
Yeah.
You know, and kind of refactoring and redoing this experience of being able to build tools to be creative with. You know, moving forward, where do you keep on getting kind of, you know, rather than thinking back like this is how we did it in Photoshop, or this is how we did it in, you know, fireworks, or this is how, you know, kind of moving forward, what's driving you that way?
So a couple things. You know, the world of software has changed enormously. You know, there used to be a time when I remember the early days of Photoshop, we didn't even have, you know, we had like, I don't know, 15 engineers doing 2 platforms and like 3 test people. You know, the world changes. There's agile development. Anyways, there's tons of change. The kinds of things you do, you know, for example, there used to be a day when Expression Blend, all we did was we wrote software for Silverlight and WPF, and right now we're doing things really using our software to create great experiences on devices. And so, you know, it's interesting. We always talked. One of the things we talked about when we were sort of starting up was how important design is, how design, you know, user experience matters, and it was really kind of an Apple thing, and it's like, no, Microsoft, this is really, 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 really important. It really is important to do your stuff right and interesting. And one of the ways that I know that we became successful, which I think is maybe answering your question a little bit, is teams inside Microsoft started using our software over and over and over again because they learned how important it was to get visual designers, interaction designers engaged with the process of building software. It's super, super important, and I'm feeling very passionate about that. So to some degree, the platforms change. There's always new challenges. The capabilities change. But you're right, it's kind of a little tiny bit of a one-note thing, but I guess that's what happens when you specialize in something. And so anyways, I hope that answered your question. Other questions at all? Where's Paul? Paul, are you out there? You have a question, I'm sure. So, by the way, I'm bringing a buddy of mine. He's one of the people that is in my network. He actually works for Adobe Systems, actually, the office that we did a long time ago. So, Paul, you got a question. What is it? Yeah, so what do you do differently? You know, I don't know if it's possible. I think you sort of you get wound up and you just do what you do, and I don't know. That's a good question. I probably would have done things at Macromedia just a little bit differently. Anyways. You know, that's a good question. It would have been even better about a month or 2 ago, but we don't actually have jobs. Although for the right person, we might find one. But we are actually growing, and we're not hiring right now, but we'll be hiring soon. So this is, by the way, Chris Bernard. an awesome guy from Microsoft right now. Thank you, Mike. And by the way, one of the things that's interesting is BizSpark. I don't know if you know what BizSpark is, but BizSpark is basically this thing if you're a startup and you'd love to have those sort of tools and you get them for free. The BizSpark program is one of the reasons why my product makes no money, because we give anybody who wants to use Blend the product for free. Which is really, really cool, really interesting, and it gets a lot of usage, but it does certainly a business it does not make. But anyways, yes?
So as being a part of a smaller team within Microsoft, how do you guys approach like changes in paradigm? I mean, like with the big switch towards mobile, it seems like it would be advantageous for these little teams to be addressing that, but how do you deal with potentially cannibalizing other smaller segments of the larger business?
Yeah. Probably the best way to respond is kind of what we're going through right now. We've been asked to do, the challenge is, one of the things that Blend does is it's really about enabling new platforms. So I don't know how much of you know much about Microsoft, but there's a platform called Windows Presentation Framework, WPF. There's also a new platform which we've probably heard a little bit about called Silverlight, sort of competing with Flash. And we kind of thought that was what we wanted to be doing. And then Windows 1.7 came out, and suddenly that's a completely different thing. And there's some unique things we do about Blend that actually is really core to the architecture. We actually, I'm not going to get into the details of it so much, but that's actually one super competitive thing that we do that so far no one else has done. And being able to I don't know, I actually forgot the question now that I've got myself into it. What was the question again? I'm so sorry. Oh, small team, thank you. So I consider a small team to be an advantage because we don't get stuck. So for example, we work together. In fact, we're actually building a component for something called Visual Studio. I'm sure many more of you have used Visual Studio before. Visual Studio is a big thing. That's what our division does pretty much. And yet we're a small little tiny company, small tiny little group inside there that we're sort of able to do our own thing. And one of the things that we're able to do is because we're small, we actually always make sure that, like, for example, the code's great, the architecture is great, we're agile, we move faster, we ship faster because we're small, not because we're so completely big. I mean, the Visual Studio team is like 1,000 or 2,000 people. It's crazy big. Yet us at it may not seem small to you, but at 170 people compared to Visual Studio, we're able to be agile and able to move things fast. So I guess I think that, does that sort of answer your question?